And welcome. Hello and welcome everyone to the session titled Teaching Crucial Social Emotional Skills, both at home and school. I'll be serving as your moderator today. And I would like to introduce our lead presenter, Forrest Walter. He is the Senior Education Partnerships Manager at Committee for Children, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to foster the safety and well-being of children through social emotional skill development. Forrest is a former educator, college counselor, and has worked with students and athletes from pre-K through college.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you all for being here today. We're so excited to be present at today's summit and being able to facilitate a presentation that we hope you all will find really gripping and informative. We are going to be talking today about social emotional skill development, its importance not only in the school building, but also at home, how to message appropriate, how to have appropriate messaging when talking about social emotional skill development, how to engage families. We have a ton of great resources to share. So there is a lot of content that we want to get through. That being said, I really want to make sure everyone feels confident and comfortable either unmuting, asking those questions, or utilizing that chat box. I'm going to introduce my co-presenter here in a moment, but one of us will be personing that chat box, making sure that we are answering those questions or making sure that we do follow up with those questions at the end of our time together. So like Lori mentioned, my name is Forrest Walter, and I couldn't be more excited to be here today at the summit. I have been doing work in the educational sector for my entire career, have a ton of experience with social emotional skill development specifically. And so whether that's my teaching second grade or supporting juniors and seniors in college navigation and identification and college readiness, coaching athletes, working with middle school students in a tutoring setting, many other hats. And so while we're here talking today about social emotional skill development, I always want to make sure that everyone in the room, and I know that you all do, but we keep the child at the center, and we consider what kind of support and what kind of basically life improvement can facilitating skill development, skill instruction, like social emotional skill development can do for the students, the children, the children that we interact with on a day-to-day, that you interact with on a day-to-day. And so let's just keep that frame in mind while going through today's presentation. And with that, I'd love for my coworker, my co-presenter, Wesleigh, to go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Wesleigh Drellishak, and I have the pleasure of being on Forrest's team here at Committee for Children, working in the Southeastern United States districts and schools. I come from a social work and early childhood development background with more in the health sector, with prevention efforts towards lung health and obesity medicine. So I'm currently pursuing my master's degree in school counseling part-time as well. And I feel so fortunate to be able to work with like-minded folks and work with districts and schools who really care about our communities and care about our children and the safety and emotional safety of them as well. So I feel very fortunate to be here this morning. I'm very excited to talk with you all about what we've prepared. And I also would love to see if everyone could put their name, title, and organization and introduce yourselves in the chat box as we continue to go through. I know we have a great broad audience today, so we'd love to know where you're coming from. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into our material and get us started on our introduction today. So as Forrest and I mentioned, we work at Committee for Children. You might know us for some of our family of programs and curricula, Second Step. But Committee for Children, we're a nonprofit based in Seattle, Washington, with the mission to foster the safety and well-being of children through social and emotional skill development. And we've been for over the past 40 years working in partnership with families and educators to help children learn and grow and thrive. And our reach right now is 24.4 million children, and 43,000 United States schools every year are receiving some impacts and efforts of our work in all 50 states and around the world. And we really, an important part of our work is developing and supporting research-based social emotional skill development curricula in our programs as well. And as we get started today, I would like to take a moment to recognize our commitment to equity as an organization. Committee for Children is committed to recognizing, condemning, disrupting, and seeking to rectify systemic injustices that create barriers to children's success. And as one step in supporting equity in everything that we do, I would like to acknowledge that Committee for Children's offices do sit on the unceded traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples, past and present, specifically those first people of Seattle, Washington, the Duwamish tribe. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about our background, a little bit of level setting to ensure that we're all on the same page when we are talking about what social emotional skill development is in our schools. So Committee for Children is best known for our programs called Second Step. Our curriculum ranges from early learning, pre-K, through middle school. We are currently working on a high school program we're very excited about. And we have programs for out of school time settings, as well as for K-12 educators who are looking for extra supports in the school and creating those safe environments in the school. Our approach is really a holistic approach to building more supportive communities for every child through social emotional learning and skill development, child protection, bullying prevention in the classroom and in the schools too. And we do put the child at the center of all of our work, and we want to make sure that families and communities are supported through this work too, which we're going to really dive into today in our presentation. And then a part of that level setting, I do want to mention the framework built by CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. This is a really widely used framework, and we do base so much of our curriculum and so many of our conversations on those CASEL 5 competencies. Those competencies, as you can see here on the screen, are self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making skills, even in the face of peer pressure, relationship skills, and social awareness. And these skills are used by everyone every day in everyday interactions as well. And the good news is that we can teach these skills. So as you look at the screen here, you can see how really important these are. So showing empathy and how to take perspective when having a conversation, making really caring and constructive decisions, owning your own thoughts, values, and decisions, and being able to communicate what those are. So this is really the framework that we build all of these conversations on and that support our students in the classroom. And because this is such wonderful work, and you can see how that affects our students and ourselves as adults using those competencies every day, I do want to talk a little bit about research. People do wonder what the timing might be in spending time in the classroom on the social emotional learning and skill development in the classroom, and also focusing on those core academics as well. And this research really shows that they are beneficial to each other. So really making sure, looking through those decades of rigorous studies, we can really improve academics through these skill developments that we are teaching your students as well, and that your families are teaching the students as well. So on the screen here, these are just highlights from a meta-analysis in 2011, looking at 213 school-based social emotional skill development interventions. And it did prove that children do better in school when they're socially and emotionally supported. So a few highlights I always like to point out on this screen is that 10 percentile point gain in academic success. So you can really know that that is for students, the highest gains are for those students who need the most support. But if you think about that as an individual student level or a whole class level or a whole school level, that is such a significant point gain. So giving those students the resources to be able to speak up and be able to focus attention in the classroom and have less disruptions in the classroom, as you can see in those lower risk for adverse outcomes too. We're really making sure through this work that these students do have those fewer referrals and disciplinary actions and disruption of class time, and that they are making those more positive life choices with these skills and those decision-making skills and their actions in the classroom. So we do have a lot more of this research and white pages and all sorts of great information available online. You can go to secondstep.org/research, Forrest might be able to put it in the chat too.
Yeah, I'll do that. And one other small point about all of the amazing things that you mentioned for students, the positive impacts are also tremendous for teachers, right? A teacher with a classroom environment that is calm and supportive and able to do really, really constructive and effective peer work, that teacher is going to be able to actually focus on instruction, focus on academics, focus on building strong relationships with their students. They are going to feel less stress, less anxiety. We have that. There's one bullet point at the end of the left side of the screen, may improve teachers' own social emotional competence and therefore reduce turnover. So I think when we're thinking about student instruction, too often we get caught up in what is the siloed student going to be receiving. And yes, we definitely need to be considering that. But also, what does this do for the educators across the school building, across the district? And then how do those educators then go home to their families or participate in the community, utilizing some of these skills that they're developing, this reduced stress and anxiety? It's a kind of a trickling effect of just positiveness seeping out into the community. And so I think that is often overlooked and something really important to consider whenever considering teaching students social emotional skills is what impact can it have for the adults of the community as well.
Thanks, Forrest. That is such a great thing to point out too, and knowing that if you support your teachers, you're supporting those students too, and how it all permeates. We all want that positive school-wide climate that really affects the community as well.
Yeah.
So now that we've talked a little bit about that research and the positive effects that you can have and really affect your community as well, I want to reiterate the importance of aligning to work that your districts and schools are already doing as well. We don't compete with those initiatives. We really want to support them and go hand in hand with them, because that is that great approach to education for your students as well. So we do already align to and collaborate with many of those important initiatives, as you can see here on the screen too, that you're already implementing in your schools, or you have individual educators in your building who really do support those initiatives too, for the different tiers of students and individual supports, group supports, full class supports, and whole child supports, whole community supports. So we do align to those, and we want to make sure that social emotional skill development is aligning to those initiatives that you're already having in your schools, with those academic standards and interventions and more. We want to support your current programs and objectives. And Forrest is later on going to discuss some language about how to speak to these initiatives and social emotional skill development in a really clear way that's most appropriate when talking about those initiatives and how you can make a whole community understand the importance and the clarity of these programs. So he's going to mention that a little bit later. But I'm going to go ahead and start talking about really how we can get started talking about social emotional skill development with your communities and families and within your schools. And I'm going to start with a video that was developed by the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, whose competencies that we were just discussing. So here's a really short video about authentic family partnerships and the importance for all stakeholders involved in education. So Forrest, if you don't mind playing the video.
Schools that engage students and families as authentic partners find a variety of ways to build relationships and collaborate. Understanding a family's community, cultures, values, and lived experiences is important in supporting a child's social, emotional, and academic development.
Parents and families are our children's first teachers, and they know more about these children than our teachers will. So making sure that we have relationships that allow us to communicate and learn from each other and really better understand who our kids are, not just when they're in our classroom, but who they are in their lives, is really important part of developing a relationship, not just with the parent, but better understanding the student themselves.
Educators find that it is essential to have clear two-way communication with parents or caregivers, as well as an aligned vision of SEL.
So as you move from your family into the school, in many respects, that's a cultural shift. The norms and expectations within your family may be slightly different than those in the school. So the kinds of partnerships that we imagine would have families as co-learners, co-constructors of learning environments writ large in the school and outside the school, to create environments where young people clear about what are the expectations and the nature of the relationships with adults that kind of shape their world and help them to achieve their goals and dreams.
These family partnerships can be fostered in a variety of ways, but consistency and relationship remain at the heart of each strategy.
Great. Well, I love that video. I think it is a really great introduction to how we can really engage families and parents and caregivers in the community to ensure that we can have a holistic approach. For me, watching that, I think it's a great, clear start to a conversation. So let's talk about the why. Why engage families with social emotional skill development? You can see a great list on the screen here too, but I really want to talk about a holistic approach to learning for our students. So as it was mentioned in the video, parents and caregivers are the first and foremost teachers of these students. So we want to make sure that they can continue these conversations. So they want to know what is happening in school. So making sure that they can have an active part in those learnings. So being able to take home activities and really reiterate those skills and work on them at home really solidifies those skills in the students, and it gives you an active part as a parent or caregiver in that learning journey. You can ensure that there is consistent communication about social emotional learning programs, no matter what program you're using, to really reinforce those skills at home, reinforce those skills as a family, and making sure that your families and caregivers and parents are part of that programming to help advocate for the importance of these skills in education for those students. So really making sure that those students receive it at school, receive it at home, and then, as Forrest was talking about, it permeating throughout all sectors of the community, how wonderfully beneficial it can be. So really making sure that you can give an active role for that holistic approach is a great why for why you want to engage families with SEL. And then next, we're going to talk about goals. So what are your goals as educators in the realm of family engagement for your schools? So what are you hoping to improve? If you are already implementing a social emotional learning skill development program in your schools, what are you hoping to improve? How are you hoping to include family engagement in your education journey? Because you know you can build those relationships with families when you do engage with them in respectful, inclusive, and welcoming ways. So if anyone is willing to unmute or add into the chat box any ideas you have about engaging families in your districts and schools or community organizations, we'd love to see what your goals are for the upcoming school year and how we might be able to discuss this later on in the Q&A and help you through some of those initiative plannings. So I'd love to either have you unmute or post in the chat box too.
And while folks are adding their thoughts and unmuting or adding to the chat box, I also know from all of the introductions, we have such a great kind of diverse group in terms of role, in terms of location, and if we have any parent liaisons I saw and parents themselves, we would love to also know about why you think it's important to engage in this work, or what you're curious about this work as well. That perspective is so important and so key whenever we're having this larger conversation, and making sure that everyone has a seat at the table and conversation around skill development in general for students, and for your children, and for students of whatever school they may go to. That is so crucial and key to making sure that those students feel supported and are really ready to learn and successful overall. So we'd love to hear if there's anyone who wants to add anything to the chat box. We'd love to address that, and if not, it's totally fine. We have a whole Q&A also at the end. I do see a few people one person may have unmuted.
I did.
Yes, thank you, Candace.
Good morning, Candace Holmes. I'm the parent liaison
Candace.
at Wesleigh High School. And this is my 19th year in education. And my mother was also an educator. And so you can see the transition from when maybe some of us were in school, or if you've been in education a long enough time, you can see the changes. And in light of what happened with COVID and everything else that our students are having to deal with, we know that they may not necessarily get the support at home because the parents aren't aware of the resources or don't know how to utilize the resources that they have. So myself and the parent advocate here at West Ashley, Ms. Aisha Harris, we look at providing workshops, bringing in speakers from the community that specialize in different areas to help our parents not only reinforce what we're doing here at the school, but to also give them that additional support and resources that they need. Because a lot of times it's not just the children that need that support, but it's the family. And if the family or the home life is not intact, we cannot have the reasonable expectation that our students will be able to come to school and learn the curriculum that we're trying to teach them. So until we really look at addressing and educating the whole child, it's kind of like we say, educating the whole man, their mental, their physical, their educational. I know in schools and public schools, you can't really address the spiritual, but to some degree, there is some spirituality aspects that I'm sure we're addressing for some students. Until we do that, we really won't be effective in educating well-rounded students who will not only be able to apply the concepts that they learn, but also be able to compete in a global society. Because I don't even think they realize that with the little computers that they walk around with in their hands all day, TikTok is fun to them, and they have the Snapchat and the Instagram and things like that. But those are also the people that they will be competing with in respect to looking at jobs and things of those nature.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing. We really appreciate you adding your voice. Just off the bat, what you mentioned about COVID is it's so real, right? Students have a loss of learning, not only academically, but also in their social emotional skills. They need some extra support to catch up, to be able relearn trust, relearn relationship skills, how to communicate. There are so many things that happened over the past few years, and we've, luckily and thankfully transitioned back into I'm doing little quotation marks, normalcy in the school building, but it's really not normalcy because of that loss of learning. And without an emphasis on supporting a social and emotional skill set toolkit for the students who have all that loss, we can't expect academics to be focused on. We can't expect students to triumph over real challenges, and they need to get a little bit extra instruction on some of these specific skills that can be taught, right? And that we know can be taught and can be bolstered. So I really appreciate you sharing your voice and unmuting. Thank you so much. And I see some other things in the chat box as well. Wesleigh, is there anything that pops out there?
Yeah, Geraldine, welcome to your first year as a parent facilitator. That's wonderful that you're being so proactive, looking for ways to engage and help students and parents. We're here to support you too. And I see Anderson 3 is supported here too with Ashleah. And we want to make sure that you do feel comfortable asking these questions, and we can resource share at the end of this presentation too. But it sounds like you're all on the right start and you all have the right initiative for really going forward with a good school year. and supporting your behavioral support systems too in Anderson 3. That's amazing that we can kind of align to that and help you through those conversations too.
I love a lunch buddy program. I love that. I wish I had a lunch buddy.
Me too. But we do have another discussion prompt. We really want to talk about really kind of what we're really here to talk about too. Forrest has some wonderful data points that he's going to talk about later on in the presentation, but many of us do know that right now the educational environment is quite volatile and challenging right now. There's lots going on with shortages and many conversations that we're having in our communities. So we know that many of you are here in this session today because you have experienced pushback or heard about another district or school organization dealing with pushback. So I want to ask, has your district, school site, community organization received any pushback around social emotional skill development? And what's that pushback been focused on? If you are comfortable sharing, we'd love to hear so we can really tailor our supports to you and talk through the messaging that Forrest is going to mention in his data later. So has anyone been experiencing pushback?
And our hope is no,
Yeah.
right? Our hope is no, but we know the reality, and we know that social emotional skill development can get wrapped up in a lot of different things. And usually, when it's broken down into the specific skills, everyone is on board, but sometimes titles are challenging. So we would love to hear from you. It looks like we got someone unmuted here.
Hi, this is Karen.
Hey, Karen.
I have to say our pushback has been very little, but I
Great.
think that the questions that we did receive at the beginning, 2 years ago, I guess now, were mainly because I think we used this acronym that people didn't understand. We all jumped on SEL, and the parents were like, what in the world is SEL? What is that? That's something new. It's different. I don't know about that. We didn't have that when I was in school. I think those are their initial thoughts. But the more they understood that, what we were talking about and why we were talking about it, and that I think to most of ours, the most helpful thing was when they realized that the reason we're looking into this is because these are skills that can be taught. And once they understood that we weren't just delving into secret places, that we were just looking at things that actually can be taught, they were relieved and just fine with it, and very supportive, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karen, for sharing. I really appreciate it. And you're so right. It's, I'll talk a little bit about specific messaging in a short bit, but it's really all about getting to the same place as whoever it is you're talking to, and making sure that you're not using some language that could be misleading or confusing. And yes, SEL, right? It's kind of a newish term. It's been around for a long time, more than 50 years, but it's been in the spotlight recently, and it's just now that folks who are not familiar with the research, familiar with the have any formal education on that specific topic, now everyone is aware of it. And so I think absolutely people may have been nervous or scared. Karen, I'd love to hear, is it how you approached specifically addressing some of those concerns that folks brought up? Was it more of just like, hey, let's sit down and look at what it actually is, or is it something different?
Again, because I guess the questions were few and far between, we just handled it sort of on a individual basis. We were tried to be very open and transparent and welcome those comments and questions. I think that was key, that we weren't nervous about answering those questions. And we did, this was about the same time that in South Carolina screening was starting. And I think the parents being able to look at the screener and, become familiar with, oh, okay, that's what that is. We just tried to be transparent and handled it individually because it wasn't a big
Mhm.
number of people with concerns or questions.
Yeah, that's great, and that's a good approach. And Wesley and I work with a lot of districts all over the Southeast, and we've heard all sorts of different stories, scenarios, everything. But the consistent definitely is that transparency is so appreciated, and that is what builds trust, right? There's nothing to hide. It's a conversation. It's not attacking anyone's values or anything like that. It's let's just sit down and talk about what these skills are and answer questions. And I think that's the best approach when having a conversation about social emotional skill development, and then also knowing exactly what type of language you should be using with your audience as well.
Yeah, and like Karen mentioned too, that really that foundational understanding of what SEL is in the first place is so important. So that helps you have your resources too. We even started this presentation with a little bit of an overview about what SEL and social emotional skill development are to make sure that we're all on the same page too. So I think now I'm going to pass it over to you, Forrest, if you want to go into
Awesome.
the what and the why and the data and how to
Yeah.
engage.
Yeah, thank you so much, Wesley. And I really appreciate you level setting. And honestly, I'm just so happy to get this interaction. Everyone's interacting in the chat box and asking questions, unmuting. So please continue. We want this to be really fruitful and for you all to get the most out of it. So keep asking those questions. And if you have a really tough question, ask it. We want to address it. Someone else is thinking it. Make sure you get that out there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, the importance of involving families in your SEL program or social emotional skill development program at a school site. And if you are a family member, this is something that you can, or liaison, I know we have a lot of different roles here. You can take this to your team and make sure that this is happening at your school site. And if there is not explicit social emotional skill instruction and you think that it's important, bring that up with the folks at your schools, bring that up at the district. This type of work can really do wonders for students' success overall. Wesley mentioned a lot about the research and data behind the outcomes for students, and they are tremendous, right? College and career readiness is in there. We saw, attendance, behavioral referrals. The one that always comes back around, especially for anyone who has experienced pushback, is, hey, this is going to do wonders for your academics as well. Making sure that folks understand that students who have the skills to not call it, right, the basic executive function skills, which are included in social emotional skill development, like inhibitory control, paying attention, following instructions, those are basic classroom skills. And if those students are able to learn and develop those skills further, especially at a young age, teachers are going to be able to teach more. Those students will be more successful. Imagine if you were a student that was at, and I'm digressing a little bit here, but imagine if you were a student at 70 percentile, right, a C minus, and you participated in your SEL instruction, and throughout the year, you were able to boost your grade all the way to a B, a C minus to a B. That student is going to feel safer. That student is going to feel more confident in taking risks, answering questions, more confident in developing relationships. They're going to feel like they belong in the school building. And so that in itself is a win, and what we're all here for. We want students to feel like school is a place they should be and want to be, and they can thrive and learn. And so I'll stop at that and start talking about the family specifically, because we know that students with family members who are who understand and are invested in what they're doing at school are more successful academically and socially. We know this. We know that whenever we can get families at home involved and also talking about these social and emotional skill development or skills that students are learning, that student is going to see another trusted adult talking about those specific skills. And so whenever you can message, hey, this is what we're learning this week, or this is what, we're learning over these 5 weeks, that is going to benefit the student because that adult is also talking about those skills. It's also a way to help adults practice the skills themselves. It was mentioned before, a lot of this instruction wasn't around when I was in school, when some of the other folks were in school. And so I've picked these skills up. I could use a ton of practice, just being honest, I could always practice these skills. And so being able to practice as an adult, practice as a family, understand why it's important to stop and take another's perspective or empathize with someone's feelings, that is just going to be huge and impactful for students. And so we know that there are also a ton of programs out there, ton of research-based programs, like the one that we utilize here. It's Committee for Children, the Second Step program, and all those programs have built-in resources. And so whatever you're using, most likely you can find some sort of built-in programmatic resources that will help engage families, help them understand what's going on in the classroom, and then give the ability to families to promote those skills, help teach those skills, and help be really involved in the conversation and skill development. Oops, I skipped ahead. Some other really great ways to involve families in your social and emotional skill development program is connecting with those families on social media. Maybe you have a theme of the week, or maybe you're focusing on emotion management or problem solving this week. Post that on your school social and encourage families to continue the conversation at home. Utilize your school newsletters and add videos, add blurbs about what's going on, making sure that it is extremely clear. And coming back to that transparency piece, make sure everything is super transparent. Everyone knows what's going on, because with that transparency comes trust. And when your community trusts in your school sites, when they trust in each other, it is holistically just a better, safer environment for everyone, not just the students, but the adults as well. Making sure that PTAs are involved in your social emotional skill development work. Having students make videos or artwork. I was talking to a pre-K Head Start organization yesterday, and they're going to be doing, after the end of each week, they're going to be doing an art project based on that social emotional skill that they practiced that week. And I just thought that was such a fun, innovative way to get folks really excited, the kids really excited, but also have the kids be able to bring home something that is not, as social and emotional skill related. It's a piece of art, but it's also related, right? It displays some sort of education and development for those students. And so I thought that was great. But whatever you can do to be creative and include this skill development in other aspects of students' days is going to just benefit everyone. Help folks understand why these skills are important and why and how students would be using them, not just in that single 25, 30-minute lesson, if that's what it is, but throughout their day at the play yard during recess. How do they share the kickball? How do they interact with someone who is experiencing bullying? Something basic like that. Like, these things are so crucial and should be utilized across a student's life, not just at school. So I also am going to be talking about how to talk about social emotional learning, social emotional skill development. And you've noticed Wesleigh and I have been kind of using that social emotional skill development as our main driver behind today's presentation, and that's really intentional. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a survey that we commissioned through the Benenson Strategy Group in just a slide. But whenever you're talking about social emotional development, make sure that you use plain language, you are transparent, use terms that resonate with your audience. make sure that you are emphasizing those. Thank you, Lori. I see we're at the 40-minute mark. I appreciate it. I'm going a little slow. I'll pick it up a little bit. Make sure that you are emphasizing the facts and not repeating the myths, right? We're talking about the academic achievement. We're talking about behavioral referrals, the reduction in behavioral referrals, students' development in social skills, peer work, perspective taking, problem solving. We're not talking about, the myths that this is, that SEL is teaching critical race theory or teaching, I'm not sure about the exact terminology, but teaching something that parents do not or families do not want. So emphasizing those facts and not repeating the myths is definitely key whenever talking about social emotional learning. So here at Committee for Children, we commissioned the Benenson Strategy Group to survey parents about their views on social emotional learning. Why is that important? Because we know families play the most important role in their children's social emotional development. And so it really matters what families, what parents specifically in this survey thought about social emotional learning. And what's really fantastic is widely across the board, parents either like social emotional learning, depending on how it is branded and titled, or want more of it at their school sites. And so we'll be posting this survey data across the board to the chat. Wesleigh, if you could do that, just post the link to the survey data where you can find all the specifics around language and also who was surveyed, what type of parents, demographic information, everything. And so this is a high level, very high level share right now. But what we found, or what they found, is whenever thinking about how to best message social emotional skill development, each of us has to understand the environment that we're in. When I am facilitating a conversation to a group of folks from South Carolina versus Tennessee versus Florida, North Carolina, my language is slightly different. And an example of that is in Tennessee, social emotional skill development is actually the coordinated school health social and personal competencies, right? It's a slight language term that someone in Tennessee is going to be familiar with, rather than talking about social emotional learning, where it's kind of has a branding across the board. So understanding your environment, what specific language you need to use is so crucial. And that language I use when discussing content really depends on the department I'm speaking to, the audience I'm speaking to, right? I wouldn't talk to a family member or a parent and say, hey, this is our MTSS strategy in a tier 2 support when considering, X, Y, or Z. I wouldn't use that language because that does not resonate with that audience. I would talk about problem solving, and I would talk about life skills, and I would talk about the things that parents are caring about. When I'm talking to a teacher audience, I would talk about classroom management strategies and academic supports, behavioral strategies. Each audience, each term speaks to a different audience. And so that's what's really important whenever considering having a conversation about social emotional skill development. And one thing that the study did find really just most of all was that social emotional skill development was that key phrase across the board. That is going to be the phrase that, Wesleigh and I have been using and are going to continue using, and moving away, not leading with the social emotional learning because it has been mislabeled and because folks already have preconceived notions about it, and utilizing something like skill development because that resonates more with folks, and it doesn't have whether it's false or not, preconceived and pre-labeled notions about it. And so we also recognize that social emotional learning has been under attack as of late, and we've talked about that, and in the media and local organizations, most of which is just routed in a misunderstanding of what social emotional learning is. But utilizing the different language and the different messaging strategies is going to be key in getting folks to understand, move away from those myths, and then really grasp as to what the goal of this type of work is. It's supporting students' well-being. It's supporting these skill development. It is supporting the child and always keeping that child center. And I know we're at 45 here, and I'll go pretty quickly through this. And I think it's just important to make sure that whenever you're in the conversation, don't fall into the, debunking that myth or misinformation conversation. Don't fall into any this or that, you said, she said. That is not helpful. Reiterating the positive effects, making sure that you're framing the conversation around what outcomes can we get for students. No one is going to say no to students gaining in academic achievement. No one's going to say no to students getting less behavioral referrals, right? So it is framing and understanding what is going to be most impactful for the audience that you're talking to. And then also utilizing your community members, right? Looking for those champions, making sure that you're using really teachers who are bought in, or PTAs that are interested, using the folks around you in your community to really support the message as well is super important. And then lastly, Wesleigh will touch on a few resources before we go to Q&A. And I know we only have 3 minutes, so we'll go pretty quickly here.
Yes, and I'm currently adding a document into the chat right now with some of our resources listed out for you. Let me just click on that so you have it. So you can share this with families and community members. There's a link to our family website specifically, so you can have everything in one place. So we can post that again later if you need it. But I want to first talk about that we are a nonprofit at the end of the day. So we want to make sure that there are free resources that you can really use to impact all students, whether you have a social emotional skill development program in place or not. We have our Captain Compassion campaign, which comes out new every October for preventing bullying, and there's fun activities and quizzes, and it's a cartoon about Captain Compassion and their sidekick Kid Kinder to really prevent bullying and be an upstanding bystander. And then we have our Mind Yeti mindfulness sessions. There's 15 free ones on YouTube, but they're also included in our second step programming for those 5 minutes of calm and gratitude and centering yourself. And then we have our Hot Chocolate Talk campaign, which is research-based guides on how to discuss hard conversations like child sexual abuse with families, and that they can have with their children. And it's a little easier over a cup of hot cocoa. So we have those research-based guides for you available online. And then next, I want to talk about Parenting Connect. This is really for those middle school students. It was created by the same researchers who created our middle school content. So it's a great place to have conversation guides and hear real voice perspectives from parents, guardians, and students about anything from screen time and independence to how to talk about those really harder conversations like bullying and abuse as well. So that's available for everyone for free too.
Awesome. Thanks, Wesleigh. And then we'll share this deck so everyone has access to all of the resource links. I want to get to questions. We know we only have 1 minute. There are also all mine and Wesleigh's information on this slide, so feel free to grab it, email us. I'll also put it in the chat box. But any questions that we can answer, and I apologize, 50 minutes flew by.
I also posted a district. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, since it's 11:49 and we have your contact information, if people could just reach out to you with any other questions or if they need further information. And thank you for your presentation today, Wesleigh and Forrest. And thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you all so much. We really appreciate it, and we hope to hear from you all. And however we can help, we're here to help. Thank you.
Thank you all.